All right, so let's begin. Hello and welcome. This is USAPECS's Filmmakers Online Roundtable. It is part of our International Polar Film Festival 2024 and APECS International's Polar Week. This is our second annual roundtable, and we wanted to just take a moment to thank all the filmmakers that are here today and all the other filmmakers, individuals, and organizations that have helped us grow the Polar Film Festival into USAPECS's largest international event. The Polar Film Festival began about 9 years ago as a way to spotlight just recent films about the polar and alpine regions. The first few years were rather informal, but the Polar Film Festival slowly began to take on a more solid character. And this was largely driven by the interests of filmmakers, community members, educators, researchers, and others interested in the polar regions. It prompted us to expand our activities to include our first roundtable last year, and the recording is available on USAPECS's website, and to continue it into an annual event this year, and to expand to our Filmmaker mini blog series. These are short written blogs by some of the filmmakers that couldn't be here today or others that are here and want to share more. And they are available through USAPECS's website as well. We're really hoping that the Polar Film Festival, the Roundtable, and the mini blogs not only aid in informing the public about the polar and alpine regions, but also to inspire future filmmakers to share their interests and experiences. So in this roundtable today, some of the Polar Film Festival 2024 selected filmmakers will discuss their works, and then we will open the discussion to include questions from the audience. But before we start, we'd like to share our code of conduct. USAPECS wants to create and foster a welcoming, safe, productive, and inclusive environment. All participants are asked to remain respectful of others' thoughts and opinions and to keep an open mind throughout the meeting. If at any time you have any concerns, we encourage you to reach out to one of our meeting coordinators. That's me, Zach, and G via the chat function. We also ask when the question section of this webinar begins that you type your questions and comments into the chat. The moderators will communicate those to the speakers. We ask that all participants besides the people speaking remain muted at all times, just to keep clear of background noise. And a quick reminder that this event is being recorded and it will be posted up through USAPECS's website and you can get to it through the Polar Film Festival website as well. So thank you very much. And I'd like to turn it over to our filmmakers.
Yes, so hello everybody. My name is Sullivan, and I'm not really into the research field yet, at least. But last semester, I was lucky enough to be part of a course at Svalbard, Longyearbyen. This course was about Arctic geophysics, and we were studying glaciers, some climate, and different interactions with sea ice, for instance. And for one of those courses, we went to glaciers near the town, which are called Terrebren and Breakbren. And for this fieldwork there with our class, I was able to film and document what we did there. And this documentation is what became afterwards the documentary called Taught by the Glaciers, which is part of this festival this year. And now I am back in France. I finished my semester at Svalbard, and I still have one more year to do at my home school here in Toulouse. And afterwards, I still don't really know what I'm going to do, but maybe go back into the research in the Arctic or Antarctic, in the polar regions, because I really enjoy my time there in Svalbard. If I have the opportunity again to go, then I probably will.
Thank you, Sullivan. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Elena. I'm from Chile, South America. I grew up in the valleys between Chile is very large, And so there, the Andes and the coast, just almost 2 hour or 3 hour in distance. So I grew up in the middle of that. And I studied geography at the University of Chile. And since this my second year, I met the glacier and I fall in love with the rock glacier specifically. And I just dedicate all my studies to the glaciers. And I've been working 2 years since I graduated in rock glaciers too, in an enterprise called GeoStudios in Santiago. So in this journey of studying and working in rock glaciers, I also wanted to express myself in a creative form. And in that path came this project that is called Criosféricas. And it's a platform right now that where people like me show or make projects that it's more creative, or you can play, or where you can be more like yourself, not just academic or rational things. That is very important, but also the play in the art is very important too. So the first project of Criosféricas is this short film called Paños de Agua Azul. And it's a recording of the journey of Marcela, that is an artist who wanted to replicate the structure of the glaciers and the ice with organic textiles. So that is the history about me and how the film came up a little. And now I'm very happy to be here. I have never been in a festival because this my first film, and I didn't study before anything with cinema or something, but just came through the intuition and things that came up organically. And just that is me right now. Thank you.
And then Dan, would you like to?
Thanks everyone, and thanks for having me here today. So my name is Dan Zietlow. I live in Colorado here in the US. And I guess I'm a scientist turned science educator and filmmaker. So my research background is actually in solid earth geophysics. And then I love research, I love science. I also felt like I was neglecting 4/5 of my personality. And so I realized when I was out in the field, oftentimes I would have my camera, trying to take photos or take videos and really kind of try to tell stories from the field. So I took a hard left into this career path. And so since then I'm working kind of in the science communication world. But I split my time between what's called the U.S. National Science Foundation National Center for Atmospheric Research, which is kind of a federally funded research and development center here in the U.S., where we really focus on Earth system science. So I sit on their education team. And then I also do some contract work on the side in the kind of science video making world with Provari Media, which is now affiliated with True Studios. And so for this particular video, there's 2 videos, but really they're part 1 and part 2 in a lot of ways. It's kind of NSF NCAR's first foray into the film festival world. So I'm also really excited to be part of this group and to have been asked to sit on this panel. But those 2 videos, so my team got written into a National Science Foundation proposal from some other PIs within the university community. They were really interested in doing kind of education and engagement work through video, which is kind of how I came in. And so those 2 particular videos were really showcasing what was called the Caesar Field campaign. So they were really interested in cold air outbreaks up in the Arctic. And the kind of part 1 of the video is really about what's the science, why does it matter, why do we care, why should folks in the Arctic be, or how do cold air outbreaks maybe affect folks up in the Arctic. And then video 2 is really just kind of more of a day in the life type of feel of what it's actually like to be on a field campaign up in the Arctic. So yeah, I'm really psyched to be here and happy to meet new folks in the film world and also take any questions.
Okay, and our final filmmaker, would you like to speak a little bit?
Hi, is it me?
Yep, and we can hear you just fine.
Okay, hi. Thanks for having me. First of all, I am Ayushi and I'm from Sikkim, the Eastern Himalaya, India. And currently, I am a PhD scholar at the Department of Anthropology, Sikkim University. And my currently, I'm working on the urban transformation of the capital of Sikkim, called Gangtok. And this project, Sherpas Amidst the Mist, was actually a project by the Indigenous and Tribal Circle at the university in collaboration with the U Arctic Chair in Arctic Legal Research and Education and the U Arctic Law Thematic Network. And it was actually brought by our team lead and project manager, Yashika Subba. And I had the opportunity to be a part of the team, which I'm very grateful. And yeah, I'm looking forward to questions if you have any, and lovely to be here.
All right, thanks to all the filmmakers. Before we move on to questions, I just want to double check if there's any other filmmakers from the Polar Film Fest in the audience. If you're here, just let us know and we'll add you to the spotlight so you can introduce yourself. But if not, we'll go ahead to questions. I'll just remind the audience that we are open to also taking questions from the audience. Just please write them in the general chat on Zoom and I will read them aloud. But I'll first get off started with some broader questions for all the panelists we have here. We've already
Hey,
touched a little bit.
Zach, before you go any
Yes.
further, we do have one more filmmaker that wants to speak. So if you just want to turn your mic on, and you should be able to tell us about yourself and your film. And now that your video's on, we could spotlight you too.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I joined a bit late. I'm Qing. I'm a filmmaker from Camel, Alberta, originally from China. The film I screened here at the film festival is A Reverie of Yukon. It's a story about our friend rafting down the Yukon River with a wood raft. My husband and I made the film over COVID when we stuck in Alaska. So I have a Bachelor of Science degree in geophysics, and also I got trained in filmmaking from National Film and Television School in the UK for science and natural history filmmaking. The film, I think the film project I'm interested in is like telling the science story, like everyone else here. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions.
All right, great. Thank you so much. And we'll get started already with a question from the chat. And we've heard a little bit about this from the panelists, but would love to hear some more about this. So is the film part of your research or work, or is this something later that came up organically? And we'll get started in the same order we did to begin introductions. Thanks.
Yes, then. So thank you for the question. I mean, originally, the field research that I took part of was not intended to be documented. It's just some students doing some work on the glacier. So the teachers are there to teach us, and we are there to learn about how to conduct field work on the glacier. But because we were split into some small groups, and technically, I was in a group tasked with measuring the weather on the glacier, and that we just had to set up instruments and just collect them regularly and do maybe a little bit of maintenance. We thought that maybe it would be a good idea to try and document what we do there, even though we had no idea of what to do with the documentation afterwards, but we thought it was a fun side project to do during the field work. And this is what we did. And it turned out to be a quite exhausting project, but it was really fun to do. And I'm really glad that we decided to do this side project beside the field work.
Thank you, Sullivan. In my case, Paños de Agua Azul came because I met Marcela, and she's an artist. She's not related with the glacier world or alpine world, but she grew up in the south of Chile near to Patagonia. So
I think we might have lost audio, Helena.
Yeah, I think we lost your audio, Helena.
oh, sorry, what?
Oh, you're back.
I'm back? Okay. Sorry. I was saying that I met Marcela and she wasn't in this scientific world of glaciers. So I wanted to take her into the glacier because she was doing this project about glaciers. And in that moment when we were getting ready to the field work, just came up the idea to make a register of how a person that have never been close to a glacier can feel, the sensations and how can change the world just seeing the ice in the mountain. And in the when I told her, she told me like, yeah, I'm going with you. And neither of us know about film, so we just started recording. And in the time, I started to figure out in my mind that it was a good idea to also film her in the laboratory, and also in the when was her exposition when she showed the art. And so it was in a project that is called Croféticas, how I said before, but also was organical, this travel with the film. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Helena. Yeah, so for the Caesar films, they were originally conceived, I guess, as part of the research project. And so when the original kind of lead scientist on the proposal came to NSF NCAR to see if we could help support the work, they also contacted kind of us as the education team to develop, what education and community engagement ideas could we develop as kind of part of the original proposal, which in general is something I always advocate for my scientist friends, right? Like talk to educators early and not after the fact. So yeah, these films were definitely kind of conceived as an original part of the project, and that way I could kind of talk to the lead scientists before we even got into the field to really understand, what were their goals for the films, what do they want to showcase, what story do we really want to tell. That said, before I was in this position, when I was still a researcher, I feel like most of the films I made were just something on the side and something that I thought was fun to do while I was out there. So I feel like it's only recently that's really kind of became an actual part of our job and something we advocate for when the field campaigns are first being conceived of.
Ayushi?
So initially, this project was brought in by the project head. I'm not sure if she is here, Yashika Subba, and because of her, I got the opportunity. As mentioned earlier, this was in collaboration with the URTech Chair in Arctic Legal Research and Education, and a culmination of the interdisciplinary curricular on the Indigenous and Tribal Studies project. Um, uh, the real, I mean, like around when we got through the idea of making a documentary, we were living so close to the glaciers. I mean, like we were always wondering what might, the pastoralists. I mean, we always go trekking up in the highlands, and then we see these yaks who are the ship of the highland. And then as like people who live in the towns and the capital, I mean, we've always wondered, not wondered, but we've always wanted to know what it takes, what are the lived experiences. And then we actually, when the research team actually went to the field, and when I actually got to know that Namgyal Sherpa is the only pastoralist family who is there presently practicing the age-old tradition of yak herding, we were kind of uh, surprised because we thought that it's always there, but then we also wanted our audience to know and our generation and I mean the youth, because the biggest problem we saw was youth out migration. Even animal physiologists have like said the largest threat to yak herding and pastoralism is youth out migration. So to bring about this, small messages, and also with regards to climate change, um, the kind of harsh climate that they have to go through also, and also it's getting warmer. And also recently we had the glacial outburst in Sikkim, which led to the Teesta flood. So all these, culminated in this project, though I feel like there's so much that we could have done and it's still lacking. Um, yeah, so thank you.
I think for me, like the film I show, like I screen here, like for the film festival, it's definitely not a part of my research. It's just something over COVID. It's a product, like of like there's nothing to do over COVID, and everyone's like in the lockdown. And my husband and I just like look at our neighbor, and he's doing this big trip in Alaska. We're thinking, okay, we're gonna follow him. So we made this film. But in general, I think filmmaking is not a part of my research, but I'm always curious about express science in a different way. So I just explored the opportunity, and there are so many crowdsourcing online. I learned a bit from YouTube, a bit from like film festival workshops and film school.
Yeah, thanks to all the filmmakers and panelists for giving us some of the background on where their film was conceived by. I think we'll do one more question where we'll go around in the same order again before we jump into some other questions where we can more randomly answer. So again, this is for all the panelists. Could you tell us just a bit more? Again, we've already touched on this somewhat, but just tell us sort of the goal in making your film and really what you're hoping that viewers in the audience take away after watching it. Thanks.
Yes, thanks for the question again. As I said, we did not at first really expect to do something with the documentation of the fieldwork. It was really more just of a fun side project to do, and especially because we were not prepared, we just filmed some part of the fieldwork. So at first there was no real shape for the documentary, and thus not a real goal. But as soon as we started to work more clearly on what it's going to be and what its shape will going to be and what the story will be, then we realized that it would be the message that we wanted to send through this film was to just give the people the same motivation that we as students had when going to the Arctic, and what the motivations that made us want to be there and do the measurements and learn about the Arctic and science that we do there. And we just want to motivate more people to get interested in this field, because this field needs a lot of more people, more students. And this is now the goal of the documentary, just to encourage people to just get interested into snow, glaciers, and more, to not only science, but just put more light on this subject, which is very important, at least to my eyes. And yeah, I would say that it's just to motivate people.
Thank you, Sullivan, again. I think my answer is very similar. The first time the goal was to show this travel of Marcella to the glacier, but also was like play, because I really wanted to have fun doing something very creative like this. But at the end, when I finished the film, I thought that the goal after that even is to show this unique form to merge the earth with the glacier, and how a person that it wasn't like in the scientific world can show really the colors, the structure, the texture, and how the people can connect with that too, with the beauty of the glacier, and the sensibility of the glacier, because I always watch videos about how is they are retreating and how it's important to protect them. But it's I think that this film is about the beauty and the sensibility and the sensation. So I think that is what I wanted that the viewers take about the film, but also I live in the freedom of every viewers, of everyone that can see it. So it's just that the art and the science together.
Yeah, and building on Helena's thoughts of showing fun and showcasing kind of, the beauty of science and our world out there. I think those were some of my goals too. I think from the lead scientist perspective, obviously they want to make sure that folks understand what the science is, why it's important, why we're doing these things. And then for my side of things, I really like showing we have fun when we're out in the field, and hey, yeah, our days are really long and we work really hard, but then we like go ski after work or something like that. So I like to kind of show that balance of what is it actually like to work out on a field campaign. And then I also like to showcase too that there's lots of different ways to be involved in science, right? Like you don't have to have a PhD in whatever you're studying. Students are involved. We have, in our case, a lot of our instrument techs are involved. We have educators involved. So there's all these really cool ways that you can be, involved in science that really kind of tap into what your particular skills are that are beyond just, going to get a PhD in a physical science. And I think too, again, kind of building on that idea of like film and storytelling are such a powerful way to engage audiences and also kind of bring them into spaces that they might not have the opportunity to go into otherwise. Particularly with Arctic field work, or really any polar field work, it's pretty inaccessible, right? Whether that's, do I have time to take off to be away from family or away from my kid, or do I have a physical disability? Is it hard to get up there? So I think film too is a really great way to like bring audiences into these places that are actually really hard to get to, and like we are so fortunate to be able to work in on a regular basis.
Hi, I think Yashika is here, so I'll pass it on to her.
Hi, yes, I can listen to you. Sorry for joining in late. Because of continuous rain for 3 days, we had some Wi-Fi problem in our hostel, so I could just, um, get into the meeting. And yeah, it's nice to see you all. I'm Rishka, and I'm from Indian Institute of Technology, Dhanbad in India, where I'm pursuing my research. And my research um, mostly encompasses how change is affecting the mountain communities in the Himalayan region. And this documentary was produced. Sherpa Amidst the Mist is the name of the documentary, and me and Ayushi, we have worked together as a team, and we have other members too who has worked and contributed their valuable insights to this video or documentary. And yeah, it was produced in 2022. I'm sure the introduction round has been over. Yeah, over to you, Ayushi.
When the research team, Yashika and her team, went to the field, I mean, they found out, it's not just a mode of subsistence, pastoralism, not just not just a way of livelihood, but also everything revolves around the practice, right? And also, it's not how we see pastoralism, how we used to see pastoralism in the past, but it's also how we see in the present. So uh, they are in touch with globalization, they are in touch with urbanization, and everything has been affecting. And we feel like this practice happens up in the highlands where no one is in touch. Yes, but also in modern times where transportation is there, where internet is there. I think our goal was to show the lived reality of Namgyal Sherpa, and yeah, I think there's so much to more to know, and we would probably love to go back to the field again. Ishika, do you have anything to add?
I'm not sure what the question is because I joined in late just now. So, could you
We're
please
just
repeat the
discussing
question,
sort of
or what was the discussion was about right now?
we're just sort of discussing the goals of your film and what you hope viewers take away after watching it.
Yes, as my friend Aishi has already explained about how we were working on the pastoral family, the last remaining yak herding family in the Indo-Nepal border. So, for the viewers, I would say it's looking into the film as enhancing voices of the indigenous communities in the polar region and the Himalayan region where the reach is quite it's hard to reach those places and to bring it to the mainstream media, and often those um, narratives go unheard. So uh, that was our main goal, to bring those narratives out, and we would definitely love to expand on it and see what we can do in the future.
I think the goal for like my film was just to show like the audience there are different ways of living a life. Like I think over COVID, like with my neighbor, like he's a Swiss, moved to Alaska, a carpenter, and he has multiple roles. He's an artist, and he did like the Yukon Quest a couple like when he was young, when he first arrived in Alaska, and over COVID, he just like wanted to make a like a raft like with all the dead wood and put together a raft on the Yukon River. I feel like filmmaking has like one common thing with science is a creative pursuit. I think in general, I'm curious about people's choice and their like how they make their decisions in life. I think filmmaking has a power to connect the people through the emotions and open a door to let you see the world like you normally don't have a chance to see. I think it just challenge the film is like just trying to challenge the status quo. I feel like as a scientist, traditionally everyone only have one career path, but from that film you can see there are multiple choices in life. You can have multiple roles.
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing about all the very inspiring motivation behind your work and the takeaways from it. And I think we'll move on to sort of the next question, where again, any of the panelists are welcome to answer or not. And I think, a lot of you described that some of this was your first experience in filmmaking. And I think more broadly, for a lot of people in early career science, they're interested in new forms of science communication, but don't often know how to get started. So one of the questions from a couple of our audience members in the chat related to her any tips for filmmaking, or if people are interested in doing this but have no experience in filmmaking, how do you suggest they get started?
I feel I can speak for that, like because I have a degree in geophysics. The first short film I made is with my cell phone. So nowadays it's like so accessible with like the things you have. I think you can start like making short films with your cell phone, from a 1 minute short film to 3 minutes short film, a 5 minutes short film, and started from like something short, and watch lots of YouTubes and pay attention on like the story structure. So every film has a story.
I could tell that maybe a tip is that when you're in the field or where you want to record, or you feel that you want to record, always do it horizontally. Because sometimes you record in the vertical way and you came to home and say like, oh my God, what I didn't in the horizontal way. Just that, maybe.
All right, thanks. I love the tip horizontal. I find myself constantly doing vertical, so I appreciate the reminder to flip the phone. We can move on to the next question. Again, anyone's welcome to respond about. It's again related to the filmmaking process, and here more broadly, what was, the most exciting part of this entire process for you, including if this was your first experience in filmmaking.
I think I should maybe first plug that the filmmaking, there's multiple parts of the filmmaking process, right? So pre-production, production, post-production. I feel like the part that most people think about is the production part, where you're running around with your camera, it looks fun, it looks exciting. That's like 5% of actually making a film. And so like, yeah, that part's definitely for me kind of the most fun, because you're out in the field, you're talking to people, you're working with folks to help tell their stories, you're learning new things. But there's all this other work that's going on too, with kind of in the pre-production, understanding what story do you want to tell, understanding who has the right to even maybe tell that story. Do you need to be working with other partners? And then the post-production, that can also be fun, although editing is tedious and takes forever. I see a couple of folks laughing on the call here. So yeah, I guess it kind of also depends on like what part of the production process you're talking about. They all have pros, they all have cons, but
Maybe I could say that for me personally, the editing process is the best, because when you're adjusting the music and the the scenes, and it's perfectly, and you replay again and again and again, and you find that parts that you don't like, and you change just a little minute second, and it's perfect. That is the best for me. It's the best.
For us, I would say the documenting part during the production time while we were doing the shooting, that was the most exciting part for us, because we had to check almost for a week. So we had to climb the Highland mountains, and we saw all those beautiful um, sceneries while we were shooting, and we had a great bonding. We had great time shooting with Namga Sherpa, so that was the most beautiful part for us. And I think I'm going to cherish it for the rest of my life.
Maybe if I may, I would say that the production part of the filmmaking is always the most fun. But at the same time, because I had a little bit of experience in filmmaking before, and that I came very unprepared for when I was actually filming, I was always stressing a little bit about the post-processing part, because I knew that it was going to be a mess, and it was. So especially with the conditions that we I had no idea if I was able to make something that would look good. And so that took a bit of the excitement of the production part. But at the same time, because it was a documentation of my class and how we were on the field, I really liked the part of the post-processing where you just take all of what you filmed and look through everything, which is usually very tedious and very not fun. But because it was just a compilation of the memories we had on the fieldwork, and it was really fun to look through again and seeing all the people in my class, which were just friends after all, and just remembering everything that we did there. That was a really fun part of the processing.
This has been a really great discussion on the filmmaking process. So I am curious, and there was a question in the chat about equipment and whether there was any specialized equipment needed for your films, or, you know, if you'd like to make a future film, would there be some sort of equipment that you would like to have to improve upon your current filmmaking process? And again, you know, relating to tips on all of this.
I think for filmmaking, for me, beside my cell phone, now I don't use my cell phone anymore. I use a big cinnamon camera. Like I have a Sony AS7 II and also a Sony FS7. So like the small one, so I think just stick with one system. Like for the finishing, like color grading part, like for the benefits of color grading, if you stick with one system, it's easier. So I always take my Sony AS7 II like to the field because it's small, compact. You can go anywhere, and it's light sensitive. It does really good in the low light condition. But the battery sucks. You have to prepare, like put all the battery in your puffy jacket, inside of the jacket. The big camera, I try the most to take it with me if possible, but they are heavy. You have to think how long you're gonna hike with that heavy camera and a bunch of lenses, plus equipment. I think one part for filmmaking, like for my for early times, like I learned my lesson from is sound recording. Sound is so important in film production. If you don't have sound, your audience immediately like turn off their screen or change to another program. You almost can have bad images, but you cannot never have like a bad sound. So sound recording is very important to make sure you have a live mic. If you do recording, or you have, if things getting luxury, you have a sound recordist like sitting behind you with a boom. That's even better. Yeah.
In my case, oh, sorry, Ayushi, you can.
Sorry, you can.
Okay, okay, thank you. At the first time, I asked borrow a camera to some colleagues, to the field work part, and after that, like 2 weeks after that, I just have to buy a camera because it's the only thing that you have to have. And also a GoPro was the best idea too, because you can use it in the water, and you know the snow, it's very flexible in all fields. And also the lavalier microphone, the audio was very important for me. So using just the audio of the camera wasn't enough, and so I have to buy two. So yeah, I will have to make maybe an inversion, but it's worth it.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And there's been a great conversation in the chat. I just wanted to point out some of the filmmakers put some links to tips on how to get started for filmmaking. So definitely be sure to check those out if you're interested. And, you know, we've discussed a bit about how one of the purposes of these films is for science communication. And I thought there was a quite interesting question in the chat. And this was related to that. And it's, could filmmaking, like documentaries, one day replace research papers? Or again, a bit provocative of a question. So just your thoughts, maybe more so on science communication in general, related to your films.
I'll get started. They could maybe complement research papers. Like I think papers in and of themselves will probably have a place for a while. But when thinking about engaging with kind of, I don't like the term general public, because that's still a very broad swath of audiences. But when engaging with the general public, the things they care about are why does this matter? How does this impact me? Who are you as a person, and why should I care about you? And as scientists, we're kind of trained to skip over all those things in research articles, right? We just get to here's all the background research I did. Here are my methods. Here's how I collected these data. Here's by the time you actually get to the analysis, you've lost most general public audiences. So I think videos and maybe storytelling could help inform how we create better and more impactful kind of research articles, maybe by really kind of thinking about, okay, who's our audience for this? How do we kind of celebrate things that didn't go well? Having fun out in the field, having fun doing all these things, and then maybe what are the top kind of 2 or 3 kind of take-home messages that I would want somebody to know. So I think they can definitely complement each other.
Yes, I agree, because papers and filmmaking are both different languages, and so we can complement, but I don't think that one can replace the other. It's the same as we can say that if paper can replace the films. No, obviously no. So yes, just that.
Yes, and we talk about climate communication in today's world and how we want to communicate our findings to the wider world, right? Just like Dan said, to the audience. So when it comes to videos or ethnographic films or documentaries, it is easier to share it to the world and let the people know about it. In terms of uh, this communication barrier that we would be having when it comes to just publishing a research work. It would really help us if we could do more work on videography and then produce such films in future so that we could share with the audience and with the, let's say, to the wider world that is not used to just reading research papers.
And thanks, everyone. And I think we'll take one more question and we'll go around to the entire panel again. And we'll go through, given your experience with this particular film, do you have any plans to pursue future productions? And if not, just share with us any of your final thoughts on this particular filmmaking experience. So we'll get started again with Sullivan.
Okay, so I'll start again then. So as I've said, I have a small background in filmmaking, so I did enjoy the part of making everything, but the conditions were not really optimal. I came really unprepared, and I had no idea how to do a documentary full on, because in contrary to making a short film, for instance, you can't really plan what's going to happen during your documentation process. So I think I would not do a similar project in the same conditions, but however, I'm really proud of the final result, and I would definitely do something at least similar if I have the opportunity to do so, because documenting is also really important for communications, as we said in the different questions so far. And also because I do enjoy making films and being able to share what we did with the general public and the public in general as well.
In my case, I also really enjoy the production and everything in the film, Paños de Agua Azul. And I have plans for a next one, but this time it's very differently from the first, because the first was very quick and very about things and doing everything almost alone. But this time I would like to take all the learnings about the first one to make another with a different story and explore another types of another way to be more close to the alpine and polar zones, but with more help, more participants, and having more time, not being so fast. Yes, I think it's the film thing. It's something that I will integrate, and I'm integrating right now to my experience and to my, backup like person and and researcher.
I think just echoing the yes responses from both Sullivan and Helena. Yes, I think we'll always advocate for, whether it's film or some other form of kind of novel community engagement technique. I think I'll always advocate that in science. NSF NCAR is actually in post-production on a documentary about the recent eclipse that went across North America. So I'm really excited to kind of wrap that up as kind of NSF NCAR's first full-length documentary. And really, I think over the next couple of years, I'm really interested in, as scientists, as we start asking ourselves more and more, how do we avoid helicopter science? How do we make equitable films? How do we truly partner with maybe the folks whose story that we're telling to like co-produce a story, rather than like me throwing my lens on a story that may have nothing to do with, their lived experience. I know Yoshika and Ayesha were talking quite a lot about that. I'm psyched to check out your films too. It sounds like you had a lot of great community working with the community there. And so, yeah, that's something I think on my mind in the future is, how do we co-produce films and make it kind of a more equitable process to mimic what we're trying to do in science.
On the similar lines, I mean, as ethnographers or as anthropologists, we want to spend more time on the field, and I feel like in this project we couldn't spend a lot of time. And I do feel like we had a lot of hour length. Though I talk about lived experiences, but I feel like if we had the opportunity to spend a longer time in the field, I feel it would be more firsthand. So I think that's the biggest thing that keeps that I keep thinking about, and I wish I can do that in my other projects.
I think for me is yes, because I run my own film production company in Canada. Between my husband and I, we have different focus. So my focus is in environmental story, science story, and my partner is interested in adventure stories. So I try to have. I'm also doing my master's in snow hydrology now. So like also a mom of 2 young kids. So I'm quite a full on like in life, but I'm still in production of one short film with a bunch of like awesome female friends. So I'm in the production of making a short film called She Measures the Earth. It's a story following 4 female earth scientists to balance their role like as mothers, researchers, mentors, artists, dancers. It's gonna be a all-female crew and cast production. I'm looking forward to deliver it by next August. It will be part of the 2025 International Glacier Year, UN's International Glacier Year initiative. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. And a lot of thanks here. So thank you to all of our panelists for today's engaging conversation. I apologize we didn't have time to get all the questions answered in the chat, but there's still a few minutes if you want to answer it now. The questions are in the chat. Also, a big thanks to hosting this, from the IARPIC for using their Zoom account, and again to all the filmmakers for the Polar Film Festival. I'll just point out that the film festival is continuing through the rest of the week, so our daily spotlights are available on the USAPECS website. So I know I love checking out the films, so be sure to continue watching them throughout the rest of the week. There's also the opportunity to read more about the particular films in a mini blog series, so feel free. Again, the link is available on the USAPECS website. And thanks to members of the USAPECS board team who helped organize this roundtable, and we're looking forward to continuing it for next year. So if you'd like to provide any feedback for attending this year's roundtable, Susan put a link in the chat to an anonymous Google form, so please feel free, just take a minute to give us some feedback to improve for next year's, and maybe we'll see some of the same filmmakers next year for their future works. So again, a big shout out and big thank you to the many people involved in this. And if you're more interested in any of our USAPECS events, feel free to check out our website or email. We're always looking for new volunteers and board members to join our organization. So thanks again, and I think we'll call it a day. I'll just ask if the USAPECS webinar team could just stay on the call. Thank you all.